You've seen it everywhere, right? On airline ads, on your carton of milk, from the world's biggest companies, net zero. It's being sold as the promise for fixing climate change. But what on earth does it actually mean? Well, today, we're going to break it down.
It really does seem like everyone and their brother has a net zero pledge these days. But with all these commitments flying around, it raises a huge question, doesn't it? Can we actually trust these promises? Or is net zero just becoming a convenient marketing term to kick the can down the road? That's what we're here to figure out.
Okay, so before we can even begin to judge these promises, we all need to be on the same page about what's actually being promised. So let's start with the absolute basics, the core science. What is net zero?
At its heart, net zero is really just a concept of balance. It's the point, which scientists have defined, where the amount of greenhouse gases we're pumping into the atmosphere is perfectly matched by the amount we're pulling out. And that's the big idea here, right? Once we hit that equilibrium, that balance, global temperature should finally stop rising.
You know, there's a really great analogy that makes this super clear. Just picture our atmosphere as a giant bathtub. For the last century, we've had the tap, that's all our emissions from fossil fuels and industry, on full blast. The drain, that's the natural sinks like forests and oceans, can't keep up, so the water level keeps rising. Net zero is simply the moment we finally turn that tap way, way down, while also doing everything we can to open that drain up, so the water level, our global temperature, at long last stops rising.
So why is everyone talking about the 2050s? What's the big rush? Well, this timeline kind of tells the story. It really kicked off with the Paris Agreement in 2015, but then these huge reports from the IPCC, that's the UN's big climate science group, made it terrifyingly clear that even half a degree of extra warming is a massive deal, with huge consequences. So, to have a fighting chance of staying near that 1.5-degree target and dodging the absolute worst-case scenarios, the science is crystal clear. The whole world has to hit net zero right around the middle of this century.
And, well, all that scientific urgency, it lit a fire. It's built into this incredible, massive wave of commitments from literally every corner of society.
A lot of this momentum has been channeled into this global campaign called the Race to Zero. You can think of it as this giant umbrella initiative that's bringing together all these different groups, companies, cities, you name it, all pushing for the same finish line. Get to net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest.
I mean, seriously, the scale is just staggering. We're talking more than 9,000 companies, over 1,000 cities, hundreds of state and regional governments, financial institutions that manage trillions upon trillions of dollars. Even universities and sports leagues are on board. It is a truly global movement.
And if we drill down and look at the world's 2,000 biggest public companies, the picture still looks pretty good. A solid majority, 61% of them, have put out some kind of net zero commitment. Now, on the surface, that looks like a huge win, a massive step forward. But this is where our story takes a bit of a turn. Because look, a promise is one thing, but proof? That's something else entirely. And this is where we have to start asking the hard questions and confront what a lot of people are calling the credibility gap. And right here, this is the central puzzle of the whole net zero movement. If thousands of the world's most powerful companies and countries have all pledged to solve this problem, then why do all the climate projections still look so scary? Are all these promises actually legit? Okay, and this chart, wow. This chart just lays it all bare. It looks at those big company pledges. So you see that over 40% have made that big net zero promise. But look how that number drops. Less than 30% have bothered to set any kind of short-term target to get there. And the number that have actually hit a target that someone else has verified, it's basically zero. That huge cliff you see between the long-term promise and any kind of short-term provable action, that is the credibility gap in a nutshell. And it's not just companies, by the way. We see the exact same pattern with countries. Out of all the national net zero pledges that have been made, only a tiny fraction, about 17%, have actually been passed into law. And without that legal backbone, a pledge is just a nice press release, not a real requirement.
So what's going on here? Well, one of the tricky parts is that we can't even agree on how to count emissions. Most countries use what's called a production-based system, which basically means they only count the pollution made inside their own borders. But critics say, hang on, that lets them off the hook for all the stuff they import. A consumption-based approach would count the emissions of everything a country uses, and, well, for a lot of wealthy nations, that number would look a whole lot higher.
And for companies, oh, it gets even more complicated. Their emissions are split into 3 scopes. Scope 1 is easy. That's the pollution coming right out of their own factory smokestacks. Scope 2 is the emissions from the electricity they buy. But the big one for so many companies is Scope 3. That's everything else, from their suppliers all the way to you using their product at home. A credible plan has to tackle all three, but you'd be surprised how many pledges just conveniently forget to mention the really tricky Scope 3 part.
Okay, so the problem is pretty clear, right? We've got a serious lack of detail, a lack of transparency, and a real lack of accountability. But here's the good news. There's this whole ecosystem of tools and frameworks popping up specifically to bridge that credibility gap.
So how do you and I sort the good pledges from the greenwash? Well, experts have put together checklists, just like this one. A credible plan has to do a few key things. It's got to cover all the emissions. It needs to be legally binding. And maybe most important of all, it has to be transparent, with a clear plan and real targets for the short and medium term.
And honestly, this quote right here, it just nails it. It's easy for a CEO or a politician to make a promise for 2050, because hey, they won't be around to answer for it. Real credibility comes from doing the hard work now, setting tough targets for 2025 and 2030, and showing us, step by step, exactly how you're going to hit them.
And this is what that actually looks like in the real world. Don't worry about reading every single number here. Just look at the idea. These charts are showing a company's actual performance, measured against a science-based path to net zero. It's clear, it's based on data, and it means there's nowhere to hide. This is real accountability in action.
The world of finance is getting in on this too, creating its own tools to hold companies accountable. Investors can now use these metrics to see if a company's target is real. They can even calculate something called an implied temperature rise, which is this super powerful score that basically tells you, if every company on Earth behaved like this one, what level of global warming would we lock in? Now that's a wake-up call.
So where does all of this leave us? We've walked through the promise, the pledges, the pretty massive problems, and the new tools that are emerging for proof. And it really all comes down to one simple, powerful idea.
At the end of the day, it all boils down to this one simple truth. A net zero pledge, by itself, means almost nothing. The real test of credibility isn't the big flashy promise for 30 years from now. It's all about the detailed, transparent, and ambitious plan for right now.
And so, that leaves us with this one big, critical question to chew on. The idea of net zero has given the world a shared goal, a North Star to aim for, and that's incredibly powerful. But we have to be so careful. We have to demand proof to make sure that this powerful promise for tomorrow doesn't become a dangerous excuse for doing nothing today.